Okay, so I think my life is a demonstration of what happens when you don't have a plan. I've changed careers at least 5 times that I can remember, probably more. And my family, they used to joke that if only I could focus, I could do something important. And focus was never something that appealed to me because I'm curious. I like knowing things. I get bored easily. No joke that I really do have a low boredom threshold. So indulging my curiosity is pretty much how I got here. I think that, and I like to help. I'm one of those people who can't sit by and watch something not being done well. So I tend to just jump in and say, wait, I'm here to help. Let me help. And usually people let me, and then things work. And so the more the things I was helping with work, the more I got invited to do those types of work. This whole whatever it is I'm doing now, this is not the kind of job that you go to college for, get a degree in this and say, I am now this, therefore please hire me. I started off as a newspaper reporter because, again, curiosity. This idea of being able to ask questions without being told, sit down and be quiet, pretty good gig. I could actually ask all the questions I wanted, and that actually was my job now. So no wonder journalism was my first love. And newspaper reporting is an absolutely dream job. I could not believe I got paid to write. And I had a byline in the newspaper, even the incredibly tiny newspaper. But what newspaper reporting did for me was connect the dots and help me see the big picture. Because when you study journalism, political science in college, you learn all the theory, you learn all the systems, but it's oddly disconnected from the lived experiences. And that's what reporting did for me. There is no better education than a year spent as a reporter in a small town because you really do get exposure to everything. And at one point, my family was incredibly embarrassed that part of my job was every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., I would drive into the local jail, like actually go inside and collect names of all the people who arrested the day before. So we could print them in the newspaper. This was obviously well before internet and social media, but it was the absolute best way to learn. And even though the industry changed, I love journalism. That journalism training fundamentally changed what I see, what I pay attention to, what I hear. And it really does teach you to notice what's missing. So often in business, we focus on accuracy and data, all the stuff, but we don't talk about what's not there. Recognizing what's not there, whose perspective is not accounted for, whose experiences are not part of the narrative. That's not something we teach in business. For me, that's journalism. It's pure liberal arts training, which often gets a bad rap, but that's where I learned how to talk to people, how to listen, and how to put all the pieces together. And so from that very small start, kept having opportunities, kept being pulled into work, and had a lot of really good people who were like, wait, I think you can help here. Let's bring you in. And so that's where we are today. Long before any of you, before cultural cartography, I had to kind of define what my job was and what my role was. And I came up with two things, the bartender and a mad scientist. Bartender makes sense, right? Because you listen and people tell you things, and that is certainly a big part of my work. It's showing up in a way that people want to talk to me. They want to tell me things. And, who doesn't like a bartender? You can tell them your troubles, they pour your drink, everything looks good for a while, right? So great, that works. But bartenders don't change things. And ultimately, I'm a change agent. My job is to create change. And that's where the mad scientist comes in. And that's where lean and agile and all of those things come in, because all of those previous experiences help me understand the gears of an organization and what levers you can pull and push. And yeah, sometimes there is a little bit of a mad scientist feel to it, because you're like, ooh, what happens if I pull this? Or if I press this red button that says no on it? There is an element of that. But ultimately, the mad scientist really is an experimenter, because if you want to do something and get somewhere you have not been, you cannot do what you've always done. So mad scientist and bartender, pretty decent place to start. I do play a few more roles because as the organizations get more complex, you end up needing more roles to play. But I think generally, if you're trying to do any kind of organizational change, start with being a bartender, add a dash of the mad scientist. It's a fun journey. The general trend line is we do something and then come up with a name for it because someone's like, what is that? So, cultural cartography, the name came by much later to capture what I was doing anyway, which is getting people to actually talk to each other, to listen to each other, and to do good things together. I mean, every organization, I think, generally does have that intent, right? We're trying to do something good together, but a lot of things get in the way. Some of it is just lack of space and time because we push our people pretty hard these days. We focus on efficiency and getting things done and don't leave room for the heart and soul work. But other factors are because we don't learn this stuff in school. And when we say to people, oh, collaborate, like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, what am I supposed to do differently when I wake up today to collaborate than I did yesterday? And so this is a problem I saw, and I was working with very good leaders who were like, hey, can you do something about this? And then I don't turn down a challenge. I said, of course we can do something about this. We can change how people think. We can change how people behave. So we started doing that. At first, it was a technique that you can apply in 10 minutes, in 15 minutes, very, very specific things, small building blocks. And then we started putting the building blocks together because people were like, wait, can you just all those together and give us one thing we can do rather than remembering 20 things? And then finally, one of my best clients said, like, I think you've got a lot of good things here. Can you put it together so somebody who's not you can use it? So product development, that's what happened. And the name Cultural Cartography came at the very end because it's just what we've been doing. We are mapping and navigating the culture of an organization so that people understand where they are and where they want to go. One of the biggest challenges has been what to call cultural cartography. Is it a tool, which a word, by the way, I really, really don't like, or is it a framework and approach? And the thing is, it really doesn't matter. It is a way to do something. Whatever you call it, it's still something that helps you do something else. It's an enabler. You decide what you want it to do. But it just really means that you don't have to start from scratch for every single problem and situation you're trying to fix. It gives you some options to work with because you talk about lean, that's my background, and it's still one of my favorite topics to talk about. My team has learned the hard way. Don't ask me questions on lean because I do get on a soapbox with that. But lean, agile, HCD, all of those things, these are not just complementary to cultural cartography, they're baked into it. These products were not created separately. They emerge from the consulting work that we're doing. And if you're trying to change the culture of an organization, especially in government, you use everything that you know and everything that you can use. So yes, lean, agile, HCD, DEI, psychology, change management, everything. So all of the work that we have done, every experience I've had, which certainly includes journalism, all of that is reflected in cultural cartography. Organization I've worked for, and I've worked for a lot because of the whole, changing jobs and changing careers, right? Every company talks about their values, and it often is like our values are integrity and courage and something so incredibly basic. And there's almost always a vision statement and a mission statement. Those are meant well, but they're often created by executives working with consultants. And for the average employee, culture often feels like somebody sending you a postcard, wish you were here. And you're like, yeah, I wish I was there too. And that's where Skyline came from. It was this idea of taking the culture conversation out of the boardroom and taking it to the break rooms and the conference rooms and the work cubicles, all of our culture. So how do you find a way to get everybody's voices included without taking up a lot of time and effort? Because really, who had that? And so the Skyline metaphor just clicked. It's something that we all know. It's something that we can all talk about. And usually we can do a Skyline workshop in about 30 minutes. And you can do it at scale. You can do it with 100 people or 20 people. And so Skyline became a very, pun intended, accessible way of inviting people into shaping their culture, letting them be part of the journey. And surprisingly, when you invite people in, they tend to like it. And so you don't have to do a sales pitch, say, let's buy into our new culture because it already is theirs. So most of the cultural cartography work came from my experiences in the federal government, which are challenging sometimes. But previously I worked for startups, I worked for technology companies, for insurance companies. There's a lot of subject matter expertise that does matter, but ultimately people are people. And things like trust and curiosity and empathy, those don't change because of the industry that you're in or the size of an organization that you're in. We certainly do use cultural cartography in our own company, like, which we built from one person to our current 15. I've used it for clients of all sizes. I've used it with nonprofits. I've often compared these products to, like, the Lego kits. Because yes, I do love Lego since I was a small kid. So you can buy a little Lego kit and make whatever's in the picture. Great, work. Or if you're like me, you can tear apart all the Legos, collect tons and tons of building blocks, and make your own things from them. And that's really cultural cartography. You can buy the kits, use them as they are, and get results. Or you can understand how they work and create your own awesome constructions. Most of the time, the problem with culture is that we don't have the word for it. It's this nebulous, intangible thing. It's something we feel, but don't always know how to translate it to words. And especially in IT, which is where I've mostly worked, anything that isn't tangible, isn't real, doesn't tend to have a lot of value. But we know it does. I mean, Peter Drucker said this, 80 years ago? Culture is strategy for breakfast. But because we didn't know how to talk about culture, we ignore it, and then are stunned by why our strategies don't work. So almost always when we do Skyline, the aha moment, just it's easy. And everybody can connect back to what they see. And it's a way to talk about something that you don't have words. Because again, all this very, very basic stuff, right? Picture replaces 1,000 words. That's what Skyline is. It's a picture that translates the words we don't always have. And words don't mean the same thing for everybody, and pictures really do. Pictures help people articulate what's in their head and help somebody else feel, oh, that's what you mean. It's the start of a conversation. And that's what Skyline is. The visual symbolism of Skyline is designed to have good conversation so that we can talk about the things that we don't have the words for. I think one, you invite people into the conversation. We tend to assume that people will ask for what they need. But historically, the culture, all of these soft skills, they were not valued, and not everybody's opinion on those was valued. So the first thing to make it actionable is invitation. And this is true for any kind of change. I used to get told that you have to do change management and manage change resistance. But why? I don't get resistance. And it didn't occur to me until I've been doing it for a while. Part of the reason I generally don't get resistance is because I invite people into the change, let them shape it. And I keep tracking the basics, but it's not that people don't want change. It's that they don't want to be changed. It's disrespectful. People are not things that you can turn around. Now, they actually have their own agency and their own perspective. So when you invite people in to say, what do you need? What are you seeing? Let's build it together. Shocker. You don't get a whole lot of resistance, and people change, and cultures change because individual behaviors change organizational behavior. I wouldn't call it implementing because these are all discovery as opposed to like execution. But I think that one of the bigger challenges is we try to fix each problem by itself. And that's not the world that we live in. We acknowledge that things are so complex and the whole VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, et cetera. But somehow we don't apply that insight to our problem solving. We think, oh, let me go solve this problem, and then let me go solve this problem, and somehow what? All the white space nobody talks about? And those problem solving efforts are not sustainable because nobody built the connective tissue. And yes, I use metaphors because, again, accessibility. So I have a 6-year-old niece who we're working with right now on the game Operation, and trying to lift out those little, heart and lungs and whatever. One, it's learning your body, great. But the metaphor really is that's how we treat problems in the workspace. As if they're very, very discrete things that are put up and picked down. But we don't have the connective tissue. We don't know how to connect the problem back to the structure, to skeletal, circulatory, whatever you call it. Organization is a human body. And one of the big things for me is I think of trust as the key driver. It's the blood. Organizations don't survive when blood flow is not circulating properly. And in this case, the metaphor of blood flow is trust. That's why we bake trust into all of the cultural cartography and our consulting work, because when people trust each other, everything else comes alive. And trust takes time, it takes space, and it takes effort. The biggest successes I've ever had, I think, are when you have a leader who really gets that, who sees the value of cultivating trust. And when that happens, everything else just falls into place so much easier. But that trust work, it has to happen intentionally and explicitly, and it has to come from the leadership. For all this cultural cartography work that we do, we can come in and we can make a difference, but we're not the ones who live there. It's their organization. They have to own it. They have to feel like it's theirs. And that happens most effectively when you have senior leaders who put their credibility on the line, who focus on changing their behavior, who talk about it and who live it. And when you do that, pretty magical things happen. One of the best compliments I ever got from a client is he described me as their organization's version of WD-40 and duct tape. His literal quote was, we can send you somewhere and you either patch up things together or you break it apart to things move. And most importantly, you know when to do which. And I think that's really culture change. It's organizational change. It's figuring out when things are stuck and get things moving and generate flow. Or figure out how to put things and people and systems back together using trust, using DEI, all of those things. So yeah, duct tape and WD-40 can apparently solve a lot of things. Being able to offer something substantive, not just complaining about what there isn't, but what there should be. And the second part for me is a couple of things. One is we cannot repeat the mistake of making DEI a siloed framework that sits by itself and comes out of HR. One of our biggest success stories about the intent and outcome of DEI was a government agency that we work with. The shocking thing was we did DEI from an IT perspective. Our deputy CIO was really looking for getting his people more engaged, getting people to think more creatively, to think deeper. And so we used DEI as part of our cultural change work. And it resonated because it wasn't about not just the obvious race identity things, but it also did not come from somebody external who did not know their work. This was not from HR. This was the same people who were doing technology transformation were also doing DEI, because for us, it was the flip side of the coin. When you want to improve customer service, especially in government, the answer is DEI. Because we have to teach ourselves how to listen when somebody doesn't speak the language that we automatically speak. And anyone who's ever worked with IT probably has this experience where, what are you guys saying? What is this? I'm asking for this and I get this other language thing that does not translate to me. Or even worse, I put a request into this black box and 2 years later, I get something that maybe is supposed to help me. In order to change that paradigm of IT and business, we found that DEI actually helps. Because when you focus DEI on, again, being that good teammate, it really comes down to how do you say what you meant to say in a way that people will listen so that you get what you need. For all of the IT technology stuff, you can build the best program in the world, but if nobody's using it, it's a failure. So when you're trying to improve IT business collaboration, it is trying to get two sets of people who maybe speak different languages and who certainly see the world differently to come together and tell each other what they need to be successful. Whether you call that problem solving, customer service, collaboration, whatever, it's still DEI. It's listening. It's seeking to understand before you want to be understood. It's listening twice as much as you talk. It's finding out what certain words mean to them. It means building trust. And so if you're trying to do that type of DEI approach, it is not a framework that can be added in somewhere else in the organization. It is not a reframing. And for heaven's sake, it's not a post DEI. It is getting back to why we work with other people because we have to. The world is too complex. None of us know everything. So, how do I put my 10 cents, your 10 cents, somebody else's 10 cents, and multiply it to have $100 to work with? That's DEI. The metaphor I most like is because I'm a nerd, I play Scrabble and I actually like it. And I'm pretty competitive, so I tend to win. DEI done well is like having extra tiles. Who doesn't want extra tiles? It makes Scrabble so much easier. You can make more complex words. You can get higher scores, which means you win, right? And that's really, I think, what's missing in this current conversation about post DEI. It is not just about finding new language. It is not just about learning from our mistakes. Fundamentally, whatever comes next should be about integration. How are we getting people to change their behavior in the context of the work? Everything I've learned about change management and people work really comes down to this one thing. If you want someone to do something, you have to establish why it's in their best interest. People are not going to do things not reliably, not sustainably, not with conviction if they don't see what's in it for them. So, my suggestion for this post DEI world is go back to the basics of the work and the organization's mission and purpose. What are you trying to do? What's getting in your way? Let's remove what's not working so that everybody can focus on the work because doing good work together is a special kind of rush and we all deserve to experience that. So let's figure out how to take the frameworks and theories of DEI out of the way and go back to how do we create workplaces where everybody feels like they have a voice, where all the good ideas come to the table, and we can combine all those good ideas to create an awesome idea that will really make an impact. That's the point of work, and that is the point of what DEI should be. And that's what I am not seeing in all these frameworks and post DEI conversation. I came into DEI very unexpectedly. I certainly wasn't trained in it, and I wasn't any kind of a subject matter expert. So I have my own interpretation and perspective on DEI. For me, it is a set of techniques, a way of thinking that puts into practice the very fundamental human value of being a good neighbor or being a good teammate in the workplace. We all know that work is complex, it's difficult, and no one works in an island by themselves these days, certainly not the kind of work we do. And when you work with people who may not think or see the world the way you do, and you're doing work for people who certainly do not look like you or think like you or see the world the way you do, you have to learn how to be a good teammate. Difficult work is easier when you have good teammates, when you're part of a good team. And I mean, who doesn't want good teammates, right? Like that should be the basic thing. And that's all, I won't say it's all, but that's really what DEI is about. How can you be a good teammate for others? And how can you make your work life easier by having good teammates? Setting aside all the political stuff, DEI is seeing the world the way somebody else sees it, understanding the differences in interpretation so that we can layer all of these perspectives together and see the possibilities more clearly. DEI is the ultimate problem solving approach because you see more clearly the current state, you see more options that are available, and you get it easier to do things. This is the part that still boggles my mind. I understand why it's controversial, and it never should have been. It is just about being a good neighbor, being a good teammate, so that we can do difficult work with less effort. Who doesn't want to minimize friction? Who doesn't want to think about 2 hours? How do I write this email so no one gets offended? That's it. DEI really is about translating your intent, aka get the work done, with the impact, getting the work done. Without people getting confused, without people getting angry, without people giving you half measures that you have to go back and chase down. Doing DEI well, it's about making your own life easier. And I'm all for that. The best use case I have for cultural cartography is one of my favorite clients. He's a CIO in the tech space. And the first time I was working with him, he was always an incredibly nice man, still is. But his general the way I interpreted his body language was, what exactly are you doing? Like, what is your job? Last time I checked, this is IT. Wait, how do you fit in? But because he was a very nice man, he didn't want to outright say no. So we got to try some small things. And I think he saw the results and was definitely taken aback. Like, but I'm not sure still what you're doing, but somehow things are better. And in one very memorable conversation, like, I ask people questions and I don't really get a whole lot of answers back. People just tell me what I want to hear. But you ask questions, then they tell you everything. How does that work? And that's cultural cartography. When you want to get the most from your people, when you want them to come to you with their ideas and their creativity and their subject matter knowledge so that you can put all these things in to solve the big problems leaders are trying to. That's the use case. And I think what he would say now is in order to do technology transformation, you first have to do the people transformation. And that's really where cultural cartography comes in. From Skyline, where you're talking about where are we? Where do we want to go? To cityscapes, which is great. We're all seeing New York City skyline. Love Lady Liberty, but I'm in Bronx. That looks very different than Manhattan, reflecting that local reality to places, which is literally great. We want to be New York, but we're Omaha. Like, can we really be New York? Maybe not. But what is the part of New York City that you want to adapt and make it part of your skyline? Part of your culture. And places is literally that the blueprint for developing your organization to match your vision and your needs. And Compass Fragility is okay, my favorite because it was my first. I put together the compass back when I was agile coaching. And this was when agile transformations took 3 to 5 years. I was just like, really? Why? Agile's so simple. So I was like, oh, I can do it in 3 months. And people looked at me like I was completely insane. I think I was called the Agile heretic at a conference once. But when you break Agile down to the most simplest things, which is where are you trying to go? What's getting in your way? Let's get there. You could actually do it in 90 days. And we did. So the book emerged after I had been doing these 90-day transformation efforts, again in government, because no one believed me could be done. So I wrote down my system. So besides the compass, we have, I think, two other products in the cultural cartography that are really fundamentally people levers. Facets is really about understanding the stuff people are dealing with. We tend to treat organizational change like it's a brand new, starting from a clean slate. There is never a clean slate. Organizations have history, people have history, and very often that history has not been pleasant. So Facets addresses that. It's what are the fears? What are people angry about? And how do you take those fears and anger and start curiosity? Because you want to understand those. And if you're talking and listening and connecting, you can convert that curiosity into empathy and eventually trust, because that is what gives you the best clean slate you're going to have for organizational transformation. And then, paralleling that is Spectrix. And Spectrix is the most fun one because it's the most individual. The rest are really more about big picture problems and, people coming together. Spectrix is that, but it's also ultimately about each person, because even the biggest organizational transformation is lots of individual transformation. And that's what Spectrix is. It's not who you are, but who can you be in this particular context to create a win-win scenario. And the more that we equip everybody with how to show up in a way that makes this particular context better, that's the escalator for organizational change in a sustainable way. And that's where collab comes in, because all this behavior change is hard. Cultural cartography makes it easier, good leaders make it possible, but it is still hard work. And when you're learning a new language or changing behavior, you need place and time to practice those behaviors. And that's what collab is. And they're my favorite things to do because it's collaboration laboratory. And it's a time and a space where there's no rules. You figure out what you need for the people in that space and you make it fun so that they can work on the difficult work of changing behavior with trust and psychological safety and curiosity and all of those awesome things that are needed.